So let's do create first. So what I'm going to do for this, I'm definitely want to, I could do this all on the same page, but this would get messy pretty quick. So I want to create another component, a form component. Now this form component is going to look different than the forms we've been doing with Rails and React. So let's just go ahead and do this. It's going to look a little different. There's going to be some different things. So I'm going to do a userform.js and just stub this out, import React.
And why are you putting it in there? I'm just, oh wait, never mind.
You good?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to make this file return div. Oh no, form here. I think as you're writing these components, just get them working, get them, rendering, and then try to do the logic. So I have my user form. It's just a simple JSX component for now. And then I'm going to go ahead and add this to my app.js. Let's just do it right before we render. So I can just render that user form. Once again, I can use this tab complete. So I'm using this component. So I tab complete and that automatically imports it. I'm going to get rid of this. This is going to make this unreadable. And sorry, I need to fix something here. Okay. So now I have my form here component. Why is that airing out? And now I can start kind of working on that form right there. Now for now, I'm just going to keep this simple and only worry about the first and last name. I'm not going to worry about grabbing an image or an email. I just want to keep this a little simple. So whenever I create a new user, they're going to be missing an image and email, which is fine for now. But I do want to match. So notice my users have a first underscore name and a last underscore name. So I'm just going to keep to that convention and just keep those naming conventions the same. So I'm going to go ahead and create a form component. Let's do paragraph. So first name, name input. So yeah, this is where we're kind of going. It's going to be different than how we did it with React and Rails. Because now I'm going to use the use state hook to handle my form state. And then I'm not going to do like an action. We're no longer going to do an action here. We're going to do a on submit handler. I'm just going to call this handle submit. So let's first get this handle submit up and running. Handle submit. And just console.log form submitted. And then I also need a button on here. So button type equals submit. And say add. So small. Okay, so my console. Now if I click add, you see how it said like form submitted really quick, and then it like went away. It's like when I submit, it's actually refreshing. Now with the React, I actually don't want my page to refresh. If your page is ever refreshing, that's probably not the right behavior in React. Because if I have some state going on here and I refresh, it's going to reset that state, which is not probably going to be good. For example, let's just grab my counter component here. So now I have my counter in my form. I can add, let's say this is like, maybe this is completely separate of my form. It's doing something else, and then I go add something and I hit add. Well, now my state is 0. It like reset that state, and like that's probably like 99 times out of 100 not going to be what you want. So what I need to do is this handle submit actually has a parameter in here or can take a parameter. And it's the event of the submit. So this is a event. So when I click this, it's an event. And it's a form submit event. And I cannot call this like prevent default method. I spelled default right, default. Because what forms do, this is just an HTML thing, forms by default try to do that HTTP request. So they do an HTTP request, which is really going nowhere right now. And that refreshes my page. But now if I do this e.prevent default and I hit add, I get my form submitted, but I'm not refreshing my page. I'm not doing a request. So there's my submit. So now I have my submit working. But now I want to grab the values of these forms. But I'm actually going to use my use state to do that. So I'm going to create some state for this. These ones I will name differently just so we can see the difference. Maybe this will help clarify it. So I want some like first name state. Any ideas on what the value should be for this? What's the default value should be for my first and last name? What data structure is it?
Array?
Not an array. Good guess, but what kind of a data structure would you think these inputs would be? Like what type of input is this going to be?
Can be a string.
A string, yeah.
Yeah, a string. So I'm just going to default these to a empty string. But I'm kind of expecting them to be a string. So, but I don't have their values yet because this is a new form. And so then I can come in here and I can do a value equals, this one I want to be first name. And this one I want to be last name. So now I can come in here, like if I could give them some default state, and that should show up in here. So this one I need to do value equals last name. But now when I if I go on to an input and try to click on these, now my input's like broken. It doesn't do anything. What I want to do is add a onChange handler. So when this input changes, let's go ahead and, write a function and perform a function to set this. So like the submit, this is going to get an event. And I'm just going to throw a debugger in here. So a debugger is like a pry. it's going to pause my code right here. So if I come in here and like go to my first name and I click something, I clicked an S. I hit my debugger. Now I'm in this code right here. I'm kind of paused right here. So I can go to my console and I can see what that E is. So this is the event. It's this React thing. It's a synthetic based event. But if I do e.target, that's giving me the input. And then I can do e.target.value. And there we go. And that actually has the new value because I clicked S. So here's the original value, it's ASDF. But if I do e.target.value, it has the value with the thing I just added. So I can hit this play button to get out of the debugger and then remove it because this kind of tells me what I need to do. And I'm just going to do, so on change, I grab that event and I saw that e.target.value was like the new value of the first name. So I just want to set first name to that e.target.value. So now when I click on this, there is my stuff. And then in my handle submit, it's just console.log. Let's create an object right here, last name. This is just an object. Remember, if the key and name are the same, I can just put them as one. Let's also just do the same thing here on my last name. So on my input here, I'll add the on change. The only difference here is it's going to be set last name. But I'm still going to set that to e.target.value. And now I can get rid of this default stuff because I don't want that there. So I can inspect. Inspect my element. It's not popping up. There we go. Go to my console. And I click add. There we go. There's my first name. There's the last name. And then I have the values. Okay, so this is where this gets, I mean, I know this is already a lot, but this is where this gets really trips people up. Because what I have here is I have some state. Here's the stuff I want to add, right? But my user state lives in the app.js. And I want to add this user to this user state. So what I need to do is I need to pass, let's see, how should we do this? How do I want to explain this? What I want to have happen, because remember from yesterday, let's think about it this way. And let me slack out this user form. So if you're trying to follow along, you have that. Let's go back to, like, think about your homework yesterday. And let's just say that we figure out how to put this data over to our app.js. And we have like this function const add user. That takes a user. And then for now, we're just going to say user equals this. We're going to hard code a user in here for now. Let's call this, we'll actually call this let dummy user for now. Okay, so here's my question from yesterday. So let's not think about like the form or anything. How do I add a user to my array of users? And I have to follow those rules that I can't change the original array. Anyone?
Yeah, you need to save it as a new array and use that. I can't remember the notation, but like the ... blank notation in order to add it.
Yeah, so let's do that. Let new users equals, let's spread out. Oh, it's called, we can spread out over our users or ... over them. And then let's add it at the front, dummy user. So in your homework yesterday, you would return this new user. But we don't need to return it. Let's just go ahead and set it. So then we can set users to this new users array. Right? I think, can we agree? Can we look at that and be like, yeah, that makes sense what we're trying to do. Right now, we're just hard coding a user. But when this function's called, we should see this. Let's do Nick Jonas. When we call this function, we should see Nick Jonas added to our users. And we should actually see our UI update because we're calling the set user function, which causes it to render. So, but I want this add user function to be called not in my app.js. I want it to be called right here. Add user. But my function is in my app.js. How do I pass that down to my form?
Is this where you'd want to export it and then import it into that Userform Js?
That's not a bad idea. That wouldn't work, but that's good thinking. It's hard to export it because this add user function is really in my app function. So it's hard to export that. But that's not bad thinking. What did we do with the counter when we wanted to give something like a name? Starts with the P.
Props.
Props. I can pass this function down to my component. Let's call it X. So I'm creating this X prop, and it is that add user function. I have a syntax error there. But so now my user form has an X prop. So now I can do props. props.x. Wasn't props.x, isn't that my function? That's my add user function. So I can call that. Sometimes these errors will pop up and it just like didn't catch the change. So sometimes you just need to refresh to make sure that error is actually there. So now I click add. Cool, we're getting closer. That added something undefined, undefined. That added my card though. The reason that added undefined, undefined is because in my add user, remember, this is where I'm rendering it. My objects in my users have first underscore name. So I need that key to match that user's array data. So if I click now add, there we go, Nick Jonas. But that's hard coded. I don't really want to hard code that. I want to add this user that was actually passed to me. So now this add user function is expecting to get past a user or expected to get past this variable. So now my user form, instead of logging this, I can go ahead and pass that down to my function. And the first name and last name, now these I can go in and add, boom, 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 add, get the undefined, undefined again. Because the value that I called it in my use state is first name. Well, we just saw that's not what it's called in my data. So I can't do this shorthand here. I actually need to say the key is first underscore name and the value is first name because that's what I called it here. Last underscore name, last name. Let's try refreshing that and trying that again. Hello, Jonas. And there we go. We've taken this function from our app component, add user, which handles updating the state of our users array that lives in our app. And we just pass that down to our user form as this X prop, add user. So now our props.x in our handle submit, that is that add user function. I just called it X. And then we can pass it to data. Now I'm getting this error again that each child in a list should have a unique key because I was using that ID. So if I want to generate a random number, I can do math.random and pass that an ID. If I really wanted to get rid of that error. Questions on that? I think this is definitely probably a little, this is definitely challenging the first couple times you do this.
Can I see your add user function one more time, please?
Yeah. Sorry, you're right there. What time is it? Let's do delete, and maybe we'll see if we'll do update. Delete's going to be a little simpler because we're not going to have to like pass a function down to another component because our user is just right here. So let's handle delete. So let's just make this, let's put a button on here. Call this delete. And then let's do a on click. And let's call delete user. Let's make a function called delete user. Now, what is this function going to need? Like right here. This needs
Some sort of key, right?
yeah, some sort of way to identify the user to delete. So we have IDs, those should be unique. So I think an ID, let's pass this an ID. And for now, let's just console.log the ID. And maybe for another thing you can do for like testing purposes is include the ID in your UI. Make sure you have it. This can be a way you can kind of see it. Like, oh, there's ID 7, ID 8, ID 9, 10, etc. So I want to, like, when I click on this button, you know, I want it to say the ID and not this synthetic base event. So I'm going to pass this the user.id because we're looping over through the user, so I can just pass it the user ID. Well, now that's you know, if that actually worked, that would have just gone through and deleted all my users because I logged all the IDs. So once again, just need to wrap that in a function. So it's not called when it renders. And now I hit delete, now I log 7. Now I click delete, I hit 8. So these are kind of the steps you want to take when you're doing your homework. Don't try to get all of delete working. Try to get it so you render a delete button on a user. Then try to get it when you click a button, maybe it just logs the ID. Like make these small steps and then move on from there. Cool. So now that we have a ID, now this is kind of like your homework from yesterday. How do we go through our array of users and remove one of them?
Filter.
Yeah, the filter method. So we can say let whatever, new users. And we're going to go through our users dot filter. Let's go through each user. And does the user ID that we're currently iterating over, as long as it does not equal the ID that was passed, we can not delete it. We want to keep it. And so for that one where it does match, we're going to filter that from the array. And then our new users should have that one removed. And then we can set users to new users. So now I click delete. That removes that from that array right here. And then we give our set function the new set of users, which will re-render that from our UI. And there is delete. Questions on that one? Kind of debating update. How are you doing? How's this feeling? Is this a lot? Is this a good amount? Yes.
Yeah, it's a lot.
You want to see update? Update by far is the hardest one. Should we do update really quick?
Yeah.
I think definitely for your homework, update's probably going to be like a bonus objective. But let's just go through it. There's a lot of different ways we could do it, but here's how I'm going to do it this time around. I kind of want to see. Oh yeah, okay. Because we're also, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to reuse this form component. So this user form component we're going to use for new and update. But let's do one thing at a time first. So the first thing I want to do is kind of decide how do I want to do update. And, you know, I could have an update button. I could maybe go to a different page, but we haven't talked about React Router yet. So that might be a little more difficult. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm just going to have an update button here. And when I click on that, it's going to toggle a form in this card. So I should be able to see the form to update this user. And I should see their first and last name in there by default. So let's get that part working first. Let's maybe just do the toggle first. All right. So let's go, because right here in our app.js, this is where we're doing this. And 1 second. Oh yeah, okay. What do I want to do here? You know what? I'm not going to do, I don't want to do the toggle. That's how it is in the Trello card. I'm not going to do the toggle. I'm just going to do the form in the user. We're going to skip that for now. We're going to skip the toggle function because what I would normally do is I would move this all out to another user component. But to kind of compromise, I'm just going to do the form stuff right here. This will keep it simpler. It's going to make our UI kind of a little ugly, but that's fine. So what I'm going to do right here is just throw in our user form. So these all have the forms. And then I'm also going to get rid of this counter because that's obnoxious right there. Okay. So there we go. I think this will be good. This will keep it simpler. So here's my form, but the first thing I want is maybe I want this to say new form and I want this to say edit form. Okay, let's kind of think about how we might do this. So first of all, in my app.js, for my user form for this edit, I actually want to let's give it a first name prop. Let's just actually give it a user prop. And that's going to be user. So for my edit forms, I can pass it a user prop that has, and then go give it my user. Now, obviously my new form's not going to have a user because by default, because it's new. So in my form, I could do something like this. I could do a ternary right here, props.user. Do I have a props.user? If I have a user, this is an edit form. If I don't, it's a new form. So there's my new form, because my new form does not have a user, but my edit form does. So that's how I change the title. What about our initial state? Let's do something similar here. Do I have a props.user for my new? So if I was given a props.user, well, that's going to have a first name. Then set this equal to props.user.first_name. If not, set it equal to an empty string. Likewise, I could do this with my last name. So yeah, that was a lot easier than trying to throw this into its own component. But now I have my new form. My new form doesn't have any default values, but my edit form does. I should also probably change the button. So kind of similar to what I did with my title. I can see if I have a user. If I can say like update. If not, I can say add. So now my new form says add, and then my edit form says update. But both my forms work, like the edit and the new work the same. So that's part of the reason I want to reuse this form component, so I don't have to like redo all of this logic. So now I can reuse this. So now if I come in and like edit, Michael to some bangs, I click update. Now I'm getting this props.x is not a function. And I'm going to change this x to be, let's just leave it. So anyway, props.x is not a function because in my app.js where I pass this add user as x to my user form. So right, that's all I need to do here. Or is it? Well, this is going to add a user to my array. I want to update a user. So I'm going to call this, I need to make another function. Not add user, but update user. And let's not worry about how this is working. Let's just see if we can like console.log the user. And I'm going to call this update user, not X. And then this should be given this function. So now I can give my forms different handlers. So one to update a user, one to add a user. . But in my user form, this handle submit, kind of like I've been doing with all the other stuff, I want to check if I have do I have props.user? I want to see if I have a user and do something different if I don't. So if I have a user, I'm going to do props. I'm going to call that props.update user function. If I don't have a user, that means it's the add function, which I'm calling X, which I should probably call something like add user, but I'm going to keep it as X for now. Just kind of when you look through this, you'll kind of maybe hopefully distinguish between the props and the value of the prop. But now I can call this update user. Let's just see if we're actually logging this now. Just going to pass this, like, I don't know, some value. On the syntax error. Inspect. To my console. I click it, I'm logging the here. So I'm actually doing that, but now I want to pass it the user. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this. I also want to pass it the ID because this user should have an ID. This is going to be props.user.id. I don't want to generate a new one here. If it's a new user, I want to make a random one. If it's not a new user, I want to just pass down the original ID. And then I'm going to pass down this updated values for first and last name. So now my console, let's add some bangs. Update. There's my updated user object. It has the ID 7. It has the first name from the form that's been updated. And Lawson. It really technically hasn't been, but I want it to be updated here as well. So we're just about there. But now I know in this updated user function, I'm getting that user. So now it becomes kind of what you did yesterday. I need to go through my users, find this one user and replace it. And create that new array and then set my users to that new array. So let new array equal users.map. Let's go through each user. Does the user I'm looking at ID, does it equal the user.id? The user that was passed to update. If it does, return the user that was passed to this function. If not, return the thing that we're iterating over. Feeling a little more comfortable with like ternaries. Map functions. And we can set users to this new array. So it's just looping. Okay, let's come in. Update. And now it's updated here. Cool. So there we go. And before I forget, let me add and commit, but I'm sure there's a ton of questions, or you probably just want to maybe try this. So this is actually full crud. Maybe it's not the best UX, but that's fine for now. It's more concerned about getting the crud done. So we can get data from a database. I mean, we technically can't show like one individual one, but that's fine. But notice we're doing all these CRUD actions on one page. And we don't have to like navigate to the new form or to the edit form. We don't do like all these refreshes. It's like it creates a really good user experience because it's all like instantaneous. You're not like hitting all these debuggers and well, all these like refreshes. I do have it is a little broken when I do like update something, it like gets rid of their email and image, but that's fine for now. Cool. So yeah, this is going to be your homework. You're going to get some opportunities to try this out on your own. Tomorrow we'll do something similar. Like tomorrow and Thursday, we'll do something similar as this, but then we're going to set it up to a backend. We're going to go back into Rails and actually add our database layer to this. So, because right now, if I refresh this, nothing's saved. My changes aren't saved. But that's what we'll do on Wednesday and Thursday. So today you just worry about React. Then Wednesday and Thursday we'll throw Rails into it. But it's going to be the next 3 days. We're just kind of going to be working on essentially the CRUD actions in React. So cool. I'm going to stop recording, but any questions or anything?